Welcome back. The Cogitarium is in session. I am surrounded by the Cogiteers. Cogitants? I don't know what we are. Cogitators, that's it. So I'm Bev Holden from the Clear Thinking Partnership, and I am surrounded by three other lovely people who are
John Bartlett from Project Libero.
Pete Bryson from Tipping Point.
And Sarah Rudder from Ginger Dog Development.
excellent. So we have been thinking about some of the things that occur to us through conversations we've been having with clients and coachees and organisations, and thinking about what's most useful to consider, given that we are in the world we are in right now in October 2020, mid-pandemic. I don't know when the middle is, actually. We are in a pandemic. It's not mid as in middle, it's just part of. But it's taking quite a lot of energy for people to navigate their way through this. So some of what we're thinking about is intended to help people to have some fresh thinking around how they might navigate their way through such uncertain times. And the topic for this Cogitarium is unlearning. What might we need to unlearn? So I'll pose the question in a moment, but from an appreciative point of view, let's have an opening round of appreciation about learning. What do you appreciate most about learning? You can take this in any direction you like, but what would you like to say?
Pays my wages because I work in the no, I think for me, I always grew up endlessly curious about the world, and I try and see most things as an opportunity to learn, and not in a Pollyanna-ish way, but just as in you never stand in the same river twice. There's always something new in a situation. And I think Socrates, isn't it? The unexamined life is not worth living. So I just appreciate the chance to learn always.
How about you, Pete?
I think learning is automatic and continual. So the thing I guess I appreciate about it is that, it is a continual process. And anybody says they can't learn something new, if you've ever had a new phone, you have to learn something new. We're continually learning things. We're continually picking up information, filtering it, sorting it, doing something with it. And so, I think, it's natural, it's normal, it's what we do. So.
Perhaps Sarah, how about you?
I appreciate the confidence that comes with learning something. And that's about, I think, consciously setting out to learn something new, as well as the sort of general realization that perhaps you have learned something without setting out consciously to do it. Learning's just full of opportunity, isn't it? Just the setting out on the journey to learn something brings all sorts of opportunities with it, I think.
So I think I appreciate the people who I learn with and learn from. So I'm a very interactive learner. I need folk around me, so I do my learning on the outside of my body. It's in the space in between us and the conversation that we have, and what people show me. So it's people that I appreciate in a learning sense, and that unlimited capacity to learn, given that we're fortunate to have our cognitive functions working for us. So that would be my thing. So let's have a think about the question. The question is, what must I forget in order to succeed? What must I forget in order to succeed? So who wants to kick us off, and we'll go in regular alphabetical order from wherever we start. So what must we learn? What must we forget in order to succeed?
I'll happily kick us off, if you like, with most of the things that people have told you throughout your life. I probably should expand on that, by which I mean that we're very good at remembering all the things we've been told we should do, that we can't do, that we'll never do, that we're not capable of doing. And I think if we were all to forget all of that messaging and all of that programming, we would be astonished by what that frees up for ourselves, I think. So there, I'm just going to leave that there for you.
So, Sarah, I really love that, because what that says is that if we believe all of that stuff we've been told, it means we're not thinking for ourselves. And I think that one of our greatest gifts is our capacity for thinking. So, so that unexamined life is not worth living kind of thing. It's like, which aspects? What do I? Well, so blah 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 blah. There's a whole sentence coming out any minute now, and it sounds like this. We've been talking as part of our Time to Think coaching work recently about assumptions, and specifically, what do I regularly assume about myself? And we've been thinking about that question in order to start to surface assumptions that are untrue and limiting, and think about how we might then just become aware of them, and we can work on them, we can change them, we can assume something instead, or just that being cognizant of that assumption can be super helpful. And that's what makes me think when you talk about that, Sarah, it's all those assumptions that have been baked into our narrative over years because we've been told stuff and we believe it and then we act as if it's true. I think starting to think about assumptions and being okay about not being certain about facts and certain things, or not facts, but just being okay with the fact that we don't have to have all of the knowledge ourselves in order to function in the world. There are some things that we're just not going to know. So that's my start of a 10. Must mean I'm coming to John. What do you think, John?
So for me, there's a couple of NLP things that are being prompted by what the two of you have said, actually. There's something about options versus procedures. And the more options you have, the more behavioral flexibility you have, the better. So if you kind of think, I can only do this one way, then you're kind of stuck, aren't you? So that's one thing. And I think it's the thing that got me into NLP was when I first heard this at the back of a 360 when I was working corporately. I got a 360 and the person said, well, the map is not the territory. And just the idea of what I thought I knew, or what other people were saying, or what the construct I had around that particular knowledge or situation wasn't necessarily the truth of it. And for me, in a lot of situations, particularly when I think about my work when I was sort of doing incident management, where you haven't got a lot of time to make a decision on the railway and stuff, people are going to go, well, what is it? Is it this? Is it that? And sometimes you're going to go, okay, I think it could be that, but what else could be true? And there's something quite powerful about being open to other things being true, other possibilities, other opportunities. And that way, again, you're back to more options. So yeah, I think to come back to the original question, what can we forget? We forget that we have choices, and that we can, generate choices a lot of the time. That's my initial start on that. Pete, what have you got?
A bit of wordplay, I guess. We could forget to remember all our limitations. So that'd be kind of nice to do. I think, yeah, the concept of unlearning is, it's difficult and cumbersome to think of it in terms of how do we unlearn something. But I think as we evolve through our lives, we tend to supersede our learning. So when you're a young child, you learn certain ways about how the world works, and then often we get stuck with that worldview of a 10-year-old, maybe. And the world's moved on since then. In fact, I'll give you a story from my son. So my son is currently in Norway, pursuing his dream to play ice hockey, and he's doing online education. And so I was FaceTiming him, and I was talking about his online education, and he said, yeah, so what I'm doing at the moment is I'm focusing just on business studies, and I'm going to do the module on business studies, and then I'm going to do the next subject. And I said, well, wouldn't it be better sort of like having a blend of subjects, like you do in normal school? And he said, Dad, he said, you know, the classroom has changed. He said, when you were a child and this is how you learned, that's because that's how they thought it was supposed to be. He said, but you know, from my research, because he'd actually looked into it, he said that, you know, it seems to be that the best way is to focus on a subject, do that subject, and then move on. He said, so if you think about it, Dad, you know, the classrooms have moved on, the world's moved on, but you obviously haven't. And so, but it was quite a nice slap in the face, really, because it was like, wow, yeah, it is, you know. So we learn something, and then we expect it's going to be true forever, but it isn't, because we're constantly evolving. So you know, what do we need to forget? We need to forget that, you know, the things that we learn, we need to maybe remember that those things are impermanent. You know, and again, it sort of like reminds me a little bit of there was an episode of QI where he went back and he went through all the facts that they presented over the previous series, and if you're familiar with the program, the in-joke was that Alan always, like, you know, came last, but in this particular episode they went back over all the facts that had changed, and actually Alan won the show for once, just because all the answers that he'd given that were wrong were now right. And you know, I think that's something that we have to be aware of, is that you know, not necessarily about unlearning things, but realizing that what we learned 10 years ago, or even, you know, 10 hours ago, may have changed. And so, you know, that's kind of where I'm going with that.
So John said a lovely thing. He said, what else could be true? And that the fact that the notion that there's more than one version of the truth. And I wonder how comfortable people are with that, because I think it's one of the reasons that we have arguments and disagreements on social media, is because people think there's only one version of the truth, when in fact it might be a bit more fluid than that. And yeah, I really like that as a thought. What else could be true? So let's open it up. What else do you think? What more do you think or feel or want to say about what we must forget in order to succeed?
Well, can I just come in quickly on that point? That what else could be true is very much rooted in practice as a mediator. When I've worked as a mediator, that actually there are at least 3 truths in the room, which is the 2 people you're mediating and you as the mediator, in terms of what you think is happening there. So yeah, I think what it's almost like an acknowledgement that could be true, and what else, not what replaces what is in place of, or whatever, but and what else, what could we have as parallel and stuff. So sorry, I just wanted to add that in.
But it's
that kind of makes me think of it in terms of, you know, there isn't an objective truth, you know, and maybe that's something that we need to forget about, is the idea of an objective truth, like there's one truth, because there isn't. There's perspectives and point of views, and that very often, again, you know, what we see is all there is, but you know, if we can open ourselves up to a different perspective, then we'll see more. And so, yeah, forget about objective truth and look for something more.
What else?
It's an interesting time to be thinking about this, isn't it? Because I'm thinking about businesses and thinking about the fact that so many businesses have had to literally kind of throw out whatever strategy they had at the beginning of the year and forget, you know, what they thought they were going to do this year. And for some businesses, that's been, you know, that COVID's led to an intense period of growth. I've been talking to a couple of people this last week who work for businesses where they just doubled or tripled their expectations of what they were going to do this year. And for other businesses, it's meant actually having to stop and forget what we were doing and what we were all about, and pivot and find something new that works right now. And there's almost for me a sense of, you know, if I'm doing that as a business, am I also able to do that for myself? now that, you know, I'm living in a different time, a different world, working in a different way, what do I need to get rid of from my previous strategy for living that's perhaps no longer relevant? You know, what's my personal pivot in this world now that makes me successful, not just what do I do with my business.
I think there's a bunch of stuff that makes me think about that ways that we need to be, and one of them is, John talked about curiosity earlier. It's having that boundless curiosity, because if we're curious, we can pretty much cope with anything. If we think that everything is fixed, and then we judge that thing and we stay, I don't know, frustrated or angry or obsessed or whatever with that thing, it's very difficult to move on from there. But if we approach things with an inquisitive mind and we are curious, then we've got a chance of understanding and appreciating and being grateful. And that altogether feels like a better way to navigate your way around the world. I think the other thing is about creativity. So you were talking about that as well, Sarah, and just that there's a necessity for everyone to let go of this misconception they have that I am not creative, because people are being it all of the time. It's just a case, I think, of finding the right conditions to be creative in, and creating those conditions for yourself. Because when John was talking before about if you can only do this one way, then it feels like there's a big obstacle. But actually, there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. That is just an awful turn of phrase, but there is more than one way to skin a cat. And that multi-pathway thinking, so I can't go through it because it's too big and heavy, but I could go round it, I could dig underneath it, I could get a leg up and go over the top, I could fly, you know, I could put my cape on and I can go. But being that capacity for going, well, there's got to be a way, hasn't there? Because that's not the only version of the truth. That obstacle that's in the way is not the only way of looking at it. So I think that boundless curiosity and that sense of, I can find an answer, there's got to be an answer, I can be creative around this, I can come up with something new and different, I can think differently. And I think there's some of the things that will help nudge people to help them pivot and reinvent and recreate.
I think there's something about almost like the custom and practice. Why do we do it this way? Because we've always done it this way. Why did we do it that way? Because it was cheaper, because it was easier, because the big boss at that point said it. How often you've been in organizations where you've completely ripped up the last year's work because a new chief exec comes in and wants it done differently. So these things can happen. And I think it's interesting at a personal level how much we see clients now where they're saying to us, oh yeah, well, we've given every member of staff a personal learning budget, but nobody's spending it. And it's like, almost like learning is something that was done to them. You know, they were given training. The idea that they will go and get it for themselves or go and seek out the next thing, I think is still alien in a lot of organizations. So I think there's definitely something about, can organizations, even if it's just giving a short list of things or saying these are the, you know, the key things we think you might need, or broadening what learning looks like to people, because particularly now we have so many capabilities, so many creative ways to learn. I mean, it's like, I love libraries and I'm sad that they're getting hammered currently. I'm a big fan of them, but you have got, you know, pretty much everything you ever lived in a library inside your telephone right now because of the power of them. So, you know, if you've got the right mindset, then you can find the learning, can't you?
Yeah. That was something else my son said about Norway, was that he went to one of the Norwegian schools just to pop in. He just thought he had some spare time. He went to a Norwegian school, and they're all wandering around with laptops. And the school had made a policy of giving them all laptops because it made their bags lighter. So they have laptops with all the access to resources that they need, rather than carrying school books. And it was just something that they did that was nice to do. And I think, you know, if you're of a certain generation, which I am, you know, I have a room full of books, you know, whereas, you know, if you're going on holiday, a Kindle, you know, so there is that flexibility. John, you've spoken about it quite a lot in terms of, you know, flexibility of thinking. You know, whoever has the most flexibility, you know, potentially has the most control in a situation. Just ask any child. They're pretty flexible with their thinking. But yeah, it reminds me, I looked across at my bookshelf there, and there's a book that just sort of leapt out on me, and it's What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And yeah, coming back to, what do we need to forget? Perhaps we need to forget all those things that we took for granted, as that's the de facto way of this is how it is, and forget that and think, okay, how is it now?
So books are meant to be read. They're meant to have the corners turned over. They're meant to be written in, and they're meant to be sniffed. More importantly, you cannot sniff a laptop and get any form of satisfaction from it. so there.
Agree more, Bev. Agree more.
Excellent. So what's your freshest thinking then? Let's have a round of freshest thinking on this question about what must we forget in order to succeed? Freshest thinking.
Well, my freshest thinking was a surprise to me, actually, which is just how much I can learn from my son. There you go. That is my freshest thinking. Just thinking there how much he's taught me. He's not even at home, so he's in Norway. He's, God knows how many miles away, and yet he's still teaching me things. That's really cool. So that's my freshest thinking.
Okay. Which way should we go?
Shall I go next?
Yeah.
For me, it's been a really good reminder, actually, to sort of park some of the things that and ways in which I've been working, I guess, for a long time. And yeah, this last few weeks has been so full of creativity and ideas and thinking around new ways of working. So I think really this has just underlined that for me, reminded me of it.
Fab. So I think I was reading there's stuff about from Stowe Boyd, the futurist, about the skills we need in the future. And one of the things he says, he talks about posterity, not history and not the future, but posterity is the bridge between the two. So it's how we make meaning of where we've come from and where we're going when we create for posterity. But he said, while we need to learn from history, we must not be constrained by it, especially in a time when much of what is going on is unprecedented. And that for me sums up the whole unlearning thing. What do you think, John? What's your freshest thinking?
My freshest thinking is something from what Pete said, where he said we've superseded knowledge as time has gone on, and I think back to the days when I was still on Windows computers continually, and you had to run a disk defrag, as I think it was called, wasn't it, to kind of tidy up, because it just put stuff anywhere on the disk. It didn't organize the knowledge well, it just put data wherever, and you had to go through and it would shuffle it all into the right place. And I think there is something about, it's really good to take an opportunity to defrag your disk, whether that's Pete's son, whether that's Sarah saying, banging into some creative stuff, and that's really, it's really always good, whether we're in autumn now, but it's always good to give a spring clean, I think, to the mind, isn't it, however that happens. So yeah, defrag the brain is prompted from Pete's thinking for me.
Excellent. So that's our question answered. The Cogitarium is now adjourned once more, and we will return with more musings. Thanks, everyone.